Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. It is Thursday, September 22nd, 2022, and with us this evening is Mr. Joe Reddy, who should be well known, I think, to probably anybody who's watching this show. And Joe, we're glad that you're on the show, and why don't you just give us a little bit of a snapshot of your biographical information, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Sure. Well, thank you, Sam, for having me on the show. I think this is my first time, so I appreciate the invite. I am Joe Reddy. I am the broker and owner of Reddy Real Estate here locally in Chelmsford. Known to many through various different activities. I've been a town meeting rep in Chelmsford for many years, and actually I was probably one of the youngest elected town meeting reps when I first was registered to vote. So I've had.
That was what, 3 years ago?
Yeah, I wish. I volunteer on a number of different organizations. I also just recently finished up being on the master plan committee here in Chelmsford. I've served on the Chelmsford Economic Development Commission. I've got 4 kids. They range 7th grade, 4th grade, 2nd grade, twin 2nd grades. Between all the sports and activities that we do, pretty well versed in what's going on. I've owned several businesses, and because I help a lot of commercial businesses here in the area, I'm pretty well versed on Chelmsford as a whole. So, my father, as many knew, was very prolific in politics all through the 80s.
4 terms on the select board.
Yeah, he was chairman for 4 of his 12 years that he served. And as a child, most people are interested in various sports and activities. I was really interested in local politics, and I spent a lot of time going around and helping him out and listening to him and essentially learning through osmosis. And some of the things that I learned at that time, I didn't necessarily know how they would apply today, but that historical knowledge and the things that I've acquired over a lifetime have been invaluable. I think not just for myself, but also for helping shape the direction of Chelmsford as a whole. I've been very active in a lot of people's campaigns here locally, school board, planning board, select board, and been lucky enough to have people listen to advice that I may have given them throughout those campaigns. So, I know a lot about what's going on just from being a resident here for a long time, and being a local business. I own multiple properties here in Chelmsford, so I pay quite a bit of property tax.
Thank you very much.
And I'm happy to do it because with 4 kids, I'm really one of the biggest users of Chelmsford Public Schools and the services. And quite frankly, I find Chelmsford to be top notch. And the people that work here and the people that are associated with this town take a lot of pride, and that I think that's important.
Well said. Well, I think that's a pretty good snapshot, and that's great. So tonight, I just want to let the audience know, we're going to do something just a little bit different, although it may, as the show unfolds, it may seem like it's the same old. But normally what I do is, when I ask people to come on the show, I have an idea of things that I would like to have discussed on the show. In this particular case, Joe and I were going back and forth, and Joe said, well, I've got some ideas that I'd like to talk about. And I said, oh, okay. So I thought, well, you know what? Joe's an experienced interviewer, and I'll defer to him, and we'll talk about the areas that he's expressed an interest in. So I think that's what we're going to do tonight. And so I'm not really sure how to do that because normally I direct it, but I guess I'll let you start off, and we'll just have the discussion. So you.
So I appreciate that.
Okay.
So one of the things I didn't talk about in the bio is that I run a Facebook group called Town Talk, and similar to Chelmsford News and some of the other Facebook groups that are out there, it's really a platform that allows people in town to discuss various topics that are happening. And what I've found is that these boards are extremely important to the vibrancy of Chelmsford, to keeping things open and transparent and allowing that information to flow. So, as a moderator and somebody that's done that, someone that's run a television show of Town Talk, I think it's important that, we talk about some of the issues that generally are not discussed at some of these board meetings just because of the nature of them. And so one of the topics that I wanted to bring up tonight was the newest development in regards to the Sargent's contract that just recently came down. And as someone who was a town meeting rep when this contract was brought to town meeting several years ago, not only myself, but many people that I've talked to throughout town are irate as to how this has occurred, okay? And we're going to be having a special town meeting that'll be coming up on October 3rd, and that will be an opportunity for—
Week and a half from now.
Yeah, that'll be an opportunity for town meeting reps to come together again and vote on a labor decision that was made by the JMLC, which essentially is, an independent group of 3 arbiters that come together and discuss the merits of both the town's arguments towards a labor negotiation and also the union side of the negotiation. And for a lot of people, if you discuss the issues that have just come down, they don't really understand the metrics behind it. They don't understand why it's such a big deal. But if you're somebody that's really spent time in town and understood that a fair and equal process is important, especially to our unions, it becomes, to be honest with you, angering. Because a police officer in town doesn't have the opportunity to go on strike. My wife is a union nurse.
Well, this is true of any public union.
Yes. Yeah. So my wife is a union nurse, and many times the union with the hospital will come to a head where they say, we get emails from the union that says, listen, tomorrow could potentially be the day that we go on strike and we're going to lock out, and the hospital will then bring in essentially outside workers to try to fill your positions. They have the right to do that. However, a sergeant in the union does not have the right to do that. So they have to go to this joint labor commission in order to get a fair and equitable decision on what it might be, because it's unlawful for them to go on strike. Mm-hmm. So in the same respects, when you sit there as a union and you think that you are negotiating in good faith and then find out that the process has been perverted, that's not good. That undermines every principle that we have here in Chelmsford. And if you go to all of the things that we've talked about, our visions and value statements, everything across the board, that kind of behavior should never happen here in Chelmsford. And so you have to kind of take a deep dive into that and say, as a taxpayer, this is not good. And recently I found out that the original decision, the original award that we were going to vote on several years ago was going to be for about $108,000, and that was the raise for the Sergeants Union. Mm-hmm. Since the day that, as a town meeting rep, I'll use the word bamboozled or misguided, since that day, we've spent over $250,000 in legal services to get to this same decision that's going to come up on October 3rd. As a taxpayer, I'm not okay with the fact that we're not doing the right fiscal responsibility of looking over our tax dollars. Why would we spend $250,000 to get a decision that's the same as several years ago? That makes absolutely no sense. The town's insurance policy is not going to cover us for the unlawful and unethical behavior of the town. And so that in itself is going to open up taxpayers to additional liability. So should the union sue the town, we could end up spending significant more money as a taxpayer to pay for that. And so, I think it's okay to be angry as a resident, to say, listen, we did not spend our money correctly. This was not a good use of town resources. And I had never thought about it before because, usually you have, lawyers that work for the town and there's legal matters that come before the town. And, it's important that the town pays to, adjudicate those or do what they need to do. But when you know ahead of time that you're not going to win a case and you don't settle out, it doesn't look good, to be honest with you. The optics of this are poor, and I think there should be more outrage, truthfully. I plan on going to the board on Monday night. They're going to have a public input session, and I plan on speaking about it. I think as a resident, I think that's important. I think many people out there should also consider, speaking their mind about it, especially if they were a town meeting rep.
You're telling me something that I don't know about. You say that the select board is going to have a public input session Monday, and what is the...
Yeah, so every select board meeting has a public input session. Mm-hmm. They don't have anything on the agenda in regards to this
Okay, so what you're saying is that you're going to go and speak during the normally scheduled open public.
Correct.
Input. Okay, all right,
Correct.
I get it.
And that's really your only opportunity, because one of the interesting things, because I do a lot of real estate, is if you go to a planning board meeting and they have a particular topic on the agenda, let's say it's Riverneck Road, you got you've got the warehousing that they want to build over there. They'll let the public speak directly about that particular project.
Well, because it's a public hearing.
Right.
Right.
If you go to a select board meeting, if you go to a school committee meeting, they usually will only give you the first public input to discuss those particular topics. Then they go off and start discussing them. So if you're unaware as to how the process works, your voice as the general public gets lost. Unless, of course, you write a letter, or if you call your local official, certainly they'll take that into account. But I think a lot of times, if it's not said in the general public, if it's not put into a public input session, then people tend to just forget about it, and they think that maybe it's not as big a deal as one would think. And in this particular case, where this decision has come down, and it's specifically stated that the town was unlawful in its acts, I think we really have to do a deep dive into that. And it's really hard, because I've watched probably in the last 3 select board races the topic of the town manager's contract come up. And I've watched many of those select board candidates be viciously attacked if they took the position that they weren't going to extend the contract. And one of the things that they had offered as the merit for that was that there was going to be a decision coming down, and they wanted to wait to see what that decision was before they did anything. And here it is. It exists now. You can see it online. You can read it for yourself. And this is a moment in history where I think select board members need to look at it and say, how are we going to proceed moving forward? Not only that, this is only just one of another decision that's coming down as well. There's another decision in regards to a memorandum of understanding that was put together in 2016. That decision will come down. Who knows how that will be ruled upon? But if it were to be ruled upon in the same manner that this one is, I think the town should take a serious look at that. But as a taxpayer, more than anything, I look at how do we spend $250,000 in legal fees on lawyers to take a position against an arbitration decision that we clearly not only just lost, but came out against the town in such a way that puts us in a bad legal position moving forward. So,
would you like me to respond to any of that?
You're a finance committee member. You have plenty of background.
Well, and I don't really want to talk too long, because I probably talked too long last Thursday night at the finance committee meeting. I'll say a couple things. First of all, the situation within Chelmsford and other towns, but we'll talk about Chelmsford. The arbitration situation is not unusual. Okay, this particular situation may be somewhat unusual due to the specific events that are related to this. But our prior town manager, and I don't really want to get into personalities, but the town manager that we had before, Mr. Cohen, almost as a matter of operating policy, allowed most of the units to go to arbitration, because his theory was, well, I'll take it so far, I'll take a hard line for the town, and then the town meeting can make the decision. So that was kind of the way he operated, all right? And there are other cities and towns where they do the same thing. So the matter of these contracts going to arbitration is not unusual, I guess is my point. All right. Second thing is, when you get any kind of a legal ruling or a decision, whether it be by a court or in this case by a mediation panel, it is certainly true that not everybody is going to agree with the decision. I would ask you if there are any Supreme Court decisions, either recent or in history, that you disagree with. And I think your answer would be, oh, absolutely. So just because a tribunal, whether it be a court or a hearing, issues a decision, that is an opinion. It may be an informed opinion. It may be an opinion that's based on certain elements of evidence, but it is an opinion nevertheless, and it can be rebutted and it can be appealed. Not that, I don't know, I guess we're not appealing this one because we're going forward with the special town meeting, okay? I would make that situation. So all I'm saying to people is, because you have an opinion that's rendered in this or any other case, it doesn't necessarily mean that it may have the force of law, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to agree with it. So what I urge people to do, and I've done this, in this particular case, and in the other case that the union has brought before the town, I read the decision. I read it several times. The first thing I ask you to do when you read any decision is you really read the decision. You just don't skim. You go back and you read all the footnotes, and you look up all the legal sites. That's reading the decision, okay? And you try to get a context. If you can do it, go back and read the testimony, all of the testimony in whatever case you're looking at, and look at all the evidence. And I would simply suggest that if you did that in this particular case, you may come away with a little bit different impression than the one you've just given on this particular decision, okay? Because there are several things in evidence that even within the decision itself, the hearing officer acknowledges in her footnotes, okay, as being true. I'll just give you a couple of examples. If you go back to the arbitration decision on page 7, footnote number 3, the hearing officer notes that the JLMC's rules and policies do not address the conduct of committee members while serving on a tripartite arbitration board. That's very important. So, in other words, what she's saying is the JLMC's rules, which are just sort of a framework, don't specifically address how members have to behave. That's important. Now, going beyond the JLMC rules, they're based on Mass General Law, Chapter 589. So you say, well, wait a minute, maybe there's something in 589, which is statutory, that says these practices are prohibited. You go back and you look at 589, it's the same thing. So the JLMC rules pretty much mirror the statute. So she makes that note. She makes another note, and she says Mr. Flanagan, who was the management member of the panel, did not receive formal training, okay? So, and I could point out a lot of other things. We don't have time. But all I'm saying is that if you really read the decision, you look at the footnotes, you go back and you look at all of the items that are in evidence, you might get a little bit different flavor for how this thing, okay? And I would urge anybody to do that with any legal decision. Don't just look at it and focus on the points that may already conform to what you already think. Don't do that. Try to approach these things with an open mind. Consider all the evidence. Now, having done that, I think some things were done incorrectly. All right, that's my opinion. But the main contention of the union in this case seems to be that the town deliberately orchestrated this event to produce the result in town meeting. And I'm telling you that if you do what I just said, if you review all the evidence, there isn't any proof that substantiates that.
Well, I do want to point to this because I think this is important.
The best you get is it was a comedy of errors. You have a situation where apparently Mr. Flanagan on the panel, who wasn't very experienced, by the way, was under the impression that what he was doing was okay, whether it was or it wasn't. The decision says it wasn't. I'll accept that. Okay. And you also had an experienced labor attorney for 20 years who's done this and has done it this way. Okay. So you either have to believe that Mr. Terry is a very unscrupulous, underhanded person, or he didn't think he was doing anything wrong. Okay. And what I'm saying is, there is no specific evidence that I can find in reviewing the entire case that shows bad intent by any of the parties. And I think that's very important for people to at least acknowledge, okay, that if you're going to say that the town specifically and deliberately violated something, you better have some hard evidence that shows that, and there isn't any. It is a confluence of circumstances. As you said, the optics are bad.
Well, I respectfully disagree on that. Let me bring this up, and then you can
they are
refute
bad.
this.
The optics are bad.
Page 34, and you talk about the footnotes. And this is the footnote that I look at that I think is probably the most damning of the entire document.
Okay.
It says, in their post-hearing briefs, The town and the union dispute the extent to which the town manager participated in the unlawful conduct or had knowledge of town council's conduct. The CERB has long held that a public employer is responsible for the unlawful actions of its supervisory employees and agents who act within the scope of their apparent authority, whether or not those acts were specifically authorized. Then they cite Commonwealth, Massachusetts law. I'll skip that here.
And I agree with that. That's absolutely
Here,
correct.
the record shows the town manager knew the town council was communicating with Flanagan, was informed of the contents of those communications, and reviewed the dissent and understood that it would be incorporated into the award. In this regard, the town, through the Board of Selectmen, authorized the town manager and town council as representatives for the purpose of collective bargaining and is responsible for the town manager's conduct as an employee and supervisor and town council's conduct as an agent for the employer. They've come out to say the conduct is unlawful.
That's all true, okay, but unlawful in what respect?
The fact that you're having ex parte communications with this is supposed to be 3 arbiters going together discussing the issue after these people have closed the discussion, but yet one side has no idea that this discussion is going on. Not only this, but the town council wrote the dissenting opinion. I mean, it's so egregious on so many levels.
Absolutely, but what I would ask is point to the JLMC rule that says you can't do any of that. Point to the Mass General Law that says you can't do any of that. What the hearing officer said was the town violated the law, and the sections of Mass General Law that she cited simply say the parties must bargain in good faith. And she made the determination that those activities were not bargaining in good faith. And that is a somewhat subjective decision when you can't point to a specific statute or rule or regulation that was violated. And she couldn't do that in her ruling, okay? So I agree with everything you said.
Did you ask her to do that? She's bringing up mass law. Now, to tell you the truth, as a town meeting rep, I wasn't disclosed any of this information.
No.
So she couldn't, as a person ruling on this, she can't know what's going on the night of town meeting. But I'll tell you, it didn't pass the sniff test. No, I was there.
But I think you misunderstand what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that if you're going to find a violation of the law, you ought to be able to cite a law or a statute.
So why does she say it's unlawful?
Because the statutes that she cites simply say parties must bargain in good faith. She doesn't define, or the statutes don't define what that means. That's all I'm saying, okay? Now, look, Joe, I agree with you. The optics are very bad, and things happen that probably shouldn't have happened, okay? But the union's contention, and you correct me if I'm wrong, the union's contention seems to be that this was all done with malice aforethought, with the objective of bringing about a negative result for the union. And all I'm saying is if you review the totality of the case and all the evidence, there is no proof of that. At best, you come out with Flanagan is incompetent, Terry is incompetent, and the town manager basically listened to what they had to say when maybe he shouldn't have, okay? That's what you come out with. But you don't come out with any evidence that says, you know, the town manager conspired with this one, who conspired with that one to do this. There's no evidence to show that. That's all I'm saying, okay? So if you're going to make that decision, it seems to me that you want some hard evidence and proof. You know, otherwise, all you've got is a bad situation where people maybe did what they shouldn't have done.
But it's not just a bad situation, right? Because this, to get to this point, cost taxpayers $250,000. That's real money.
Understand that.
And not only that, but because of the way that this is written, they probably will most likely prevail in a lawsuit against the town, which will be additional money to the taxpayers. How is that at all okay? I don't understand that. That's why I'm outraged.
And that's fine, okay.
I mean, this is supposed to be somebody that has been such a great fiscal manager of the town.
Okay.
How do you get to this point?
All right. So again, I will just reiterate for the audience, if you want a complete understanding of the case itself, you need to go beyond what this decision is. You need to find out, you need to read the evidence, you need to read the testimony, and you need to actually look at all of the evidence in the case. And to me, the question is, You can be upset with the way things have unfolded. And I said Thursday night, this has gone on for 7 years, and I want it stopped. Okay, and that's why I wanted.
I mean, real people have been hurt by this. You have real families that have been waiting for a pay raise.
I want the thing to stop now. It's gone on, and if it goes on any longer, it's only going to get worse. Okay, understand that. So, but there are other considerations. You know, from the Finance Committee point of view, we have to be concerned about financial impact as well. But if we're going to talk about, you know, this specific subject and who did what and under what intentions, then you have to, again, be guided by the actual evidence, okay? And if you're going to accuse anybody in the town of deliberately hatching a plot to do something, you better have actual evidence that says that's what happened. And from what my review of the evidence and the entire case in its totality, there isn't anything that says that, okay? It's, this is what happened, these are what the guys did, and within the context of everybody's understanding of how these things are supposed to happen, they violated that, okay? But we need to be able to say, for a, to my way of thinking, if I'm writing a decision that says you broke the law, I want to point to a specific statute that says the activity that you engaged in was unlawful, and she didn't do that. What she said was the town's activities in this area are unlawful because it constitutes bargaining in bad faith. That was her ruling.
Right.
But she didn't say because.
Is that how you want your town to act?
No, I don't.
Bargain in bad faith?
I don't.
I can't.
I don't.
It goes against, that's my whole point. It goes against all of our visions and values. It goes against general code of conduct.
I get that. But if you review the case, like I say, in its entirety, reasonable people can disagree on what happened. And all I'm saying is people need to understand the totality of the case, all of the evidence, before they make up their mind. Okay? And that's all I'm asking people to do, because there's plenty of indication in the case itself of what actually happened. And there's an evidentiary trail. And you have to be guided by that, all right? Not what you think happened, or it has to be based on fact. And reasonable people can disagree, all right? So, but anyway, you've, you know, made your point clear, and I think it's very clear how you feel about it, okay? And that's fine.
So I will go back and I will circle back for you, because you have asked questions and I will get answers. But anybody that is interested in this topic should, in fact, reach out to your select board members, should actually come to a public input session and voice your concern, because I think that is the place to do it. Certainly it will definitely get hashed out at town meeting, but I do think that there are merits to why our public safety officials deserve this raise, and why we should be voting in the affirmative at town meeting.
And I don't think if people would watch the FinCom meeting of last week, I don't think any of the FinCom members disputed that. Okay, I think everybody felt that, you know, basically any employee over whatever period of time deserves whatever the normal raise schedule would be. And I don't think there was any disagreement on that at all.
Right.
Okay?
They may not have liked the award, but as you had said, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. You don't get to decide, you know, at the end of the day, that's how it's brought down. But this is extraordinary. It's not your typical decision where the town didn't get the benefit of it or the union didn't get the benefit of it. This comes with an extra flair that I think is never been seen before in our community. So, you know, I don't think it's something you can once over, and I think a lot of people want to do that.
It's happened in other communities where you've had dissents, but it's not common.
Yeah. So the dissent's okay as long as that's your own personal dissent and not perverted by somebody on one side or the other. I think that's really the case here, right? Is that, you know.
Well, again, that's also a matter of interpretation, because you don't really know what the intent was. So anyway, we're out of time.
Wow.
So
well, I appreciate you having me on.
15, 14, 13 seconds countdown, and maybe next time we have you on, we can talk about real estate, because that's something that I'm interested in, and something you're certainly interested in.
Absolutely.